Is it possible that Pete Alonso has become clutch? We've started to see a trend that goes back to the Milwaukee series in the playoffs last year and continues on into this season, where multiple opportunities where the pressure seems like it was at its absolute highest. Instead, Pete Alonso has come alongside everybody and led the way, most recently last night with a clutch 3-run homer. Just a couple of days ago, he had a clutch grand slam. And going back to that Milwaukee series, you have 3 examples in his last 20 or 30 games played. I don't know the exact number, but we'll just say 30 to be safe. I'm pretty sure it's less than that, where Pete Alonso has come through in the clutch, come through when the team has needed him most. And so I think it is to the point in time where we need to start asking this question. I'm not asking the question, is he the best power hitter in baseball? I'm not even asking the question, is he the best hitter on the Mets? Not asking the question of anything other than, can he get to the point where his former reputation of Pete Alonso hits lots of home runs, but never when it matters. Here we are 6 games into the 2025 season, and he has had 2 monster home runs that happened in games where they were absolutely needed to turn the momentum around and to make things significantly better for the Mets and to give them a chance to win. And I think that there is a possibility that we are seeing a narrative change going on here. And I think it's something that is certainly worth watching, certainly worth considering as we move ahead and as we look beyond as 2025 continues, from this point forward. So I really want to know, what do you guys think? How many times does a player like Pete Alonso need to come through in key situations before that idea or that label of Pete Alonso is not a clutch batter? He doesn't know what he's doing. He only hits home runs when it doesn't count. How many does he need to do? And I would start to say, we need to really start looking at this. Obviously, Pete is highly motivated to do well this year and do well beyond even a normal year. He saw basically in the offseason that no team truly trusted him as a reliable offensive weapon when things were on the line, right? And so I think basically a lot of teams said, sure, great, you did that in that one game in Milwaukee, and that was huge for your team. But if you look at some of his career stats, like his career stats with bases loaded, he's hitting well under 300. In fact, closer to 200 than anything. Now, again, I think that was before that grand slam that he had the other day. But I think a lot of teams were like, well, you know what? I don't know if we can really trust you, Pete. So we're just not going to risk offering you this giant contract that we need for someone who's not just a great power hitter, but someone who is a game changer, someone who can actually win games for you, both in the regular season and the playoffs. And of course, Pete has not had a lot of opportunity in the playoffs over the years, and that makes it maybe a little bit more difficult because sometimes you just happen to be, if you don't have the opportunity to be in clutch situations, then that's it. But I know there was plenty of frustration, and I can speak for myself as a fan as well as many Mets fans, that there have been many times where Pete has come to the plate and simply just not done the home run, not done something amazing, but not even accomplish anything, just ground outs, strikeouts, not even solid contact on the ball, that sort of thing, not even moving the runners forward. And I think that label wears on you. One of the best things about sports, though, is that a narrative is only a narrative until you change the narrative, right? For the longest time, the narrative was Phil Mickelson couldn't win a major until he goes out and wins a major, right? So all these things are true in sports, is that you have narratives that exist because of past performance, but both positive and negative past performance does not indicate a future guaranteed result. And I think that this discussion is one that needs to be had. I think it's one that we need to be talking about from this point going forward and continuing to do that. And of course, Pete will be tracking this and monitoring this because all of this will go into his negotiations for the bigger contract for when he almost certainly will opt out unless there's some sort of injury or something like that, or has just an amazingly subpar season that, those would be about the only two circumstances where I can see that Pete will not be opting out. So Pete knows he is playing for a contract, and yet at the same time, he still looks like he's playing significantly looser than last year. And is it possible that he just something clicked in that Milwaukee game when he hit that home run? Something just clicked in him that these moments that are still big because now it's for a new season, these are real games. But I mean, you can make the argument that the Mets don't win 2 of their 3 games that they've won this year without Pete Alonso coming through in the clutch. And as excited as we are about Juan Soto coming to this team and hopefully the continuing emergence of Vientos, and once the pitching rotation gets all back healthy, there's lots of things to look forward to with this team. But this idea that Pete Alonso, even if his numbers are the same, if the when he comes through, when he makes the big hits, if that is able to change sometime from this point forward, going into this season and all the way through, I think the perspective of Mets fans who were kind of on the fence, because I know by the end of the negotiations, there were a lot of Mets fans who were just done. They were done with Pete. They didn't want to think about it, talk about it anymore. And they're just ready to move on. But I bet you if this continues going forward, that you could see an opportunity where Pete Alonso is going to become even more beloved by those who have always loved him, and for those who are on the fence, win them over. There will be some people who will by no means want to sign Pete Alonso to the long term. There's going to be plenty of people who would say, look, if it's going to be Vlad Guerrero Jr. or Pete, then I'm going to pick Vlad. And I certainly understand that. There's a fair argument to be made statistically from the past, but talking in the present and what Pete has meant to this team, and specifically what he has meant to this team this year so far. And then if you want to reach back just a little bit, you have 3 clutch home runs by Pete Alonso that have come at key points in games and have literally been the momentum shifters in the game. Now, I don't think that any single player in baseball should be held to this standard of, oh my goodness, he must come through every single time. I mean, no batter's going to hit 1,000, right? That's just not what it is. But can Pete continue to build on this? And as a Mets fan, of course, you're hoping that. And if you're a Pete Alonso fan, you're hoping that. And honestly, just as a player development, if you're just a fan of Pete as a player and just a fan of seeing baseball players continue to grow and do the things that they are wanting to do, I think there is a significant argument to be made that this is good, not just for Pete and the Mets, it's also good for baseball to have another clutch power hitter, to have someone that you're wanting to come up in those situations. And of course, broader for this lineup as a whole, it will be better for Juan Soto. Juan Soto will see better pitches if Pete Alonso is a solid bat behind him. It's just going to be natural because, pitchers are going to be much more likely to challenge Soto if they're worried about the threat of Pete hitting a 2-run homer behind Soto. So the more developed Pete's clutch gene is, the more it's going to impact this lineup up and down. And of course, the more clutch he is, that means the more at bats and opportunities that players behind Pete will have as well. So whether it's Nimmo or Vientos getting to come up with either additional runners on or with the bases cleared off because of a Pete Alonso home run. So I'm just kind of curious, what do you guys think? I try to be very cautious on making judgments based off of the first week of the season. In the same way, I try to be cautious about making too many judgments based off of spring training. You want to get hyped, you want to get excited because it is spring and it's just the first week of the season. But I think you can make an argument for Pete here that his clutchness is not just this season. It is now 6 games into the season. He's been a major factor in 2 of the 3 wins that the Mets have had. And going back to that Milwaukee series in the playoffs last year, that's 3 clutch home runs under high pressure situations, late in the game. We're not just talking about a clutch situation in the first inning. And I don't even know, you can probably define clutch however you want, but I would say coming up in a situation where the game is potentially on the line and coming through in a big way. I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking. So, have your opinions on Pete changed at this point? Do you still do you feel nervous when he's up that he's not going to come through, or are you to the point where you're like, hey, you know what? I trust that Pete's going to be able to pull this off. I trust that he's going to be able to do this, and so it will be interesting to see going forward if that is what it is. But I feel like this is the topic that we as Mets fans can talk about, and I think honestly, based on what we're seeing this year, we can be excited about that. You have the potential here with lots of runners being able to get on base before Pete gets to the plate, specifically Lindor, once he gets his swing right. And we're starting to see little signs of Lindor breaking out here. And of course, Soto, who's, not going to be perfect every game by any means, but he will be on base a lot in front of Pete. And then having the backup of either Nimmo or Vientos behind him, most likely in this lineup. I think that would just be a really, really great thing for the Mets, for this Mets team, if Pete could really get to this point. And of course, for Pete himself, if he can prove that not just in the first week of this season, but throughout the entire season, being able to pinpoint multiple clutch hits, that is going to make his market value go up tremendously. And it will almost certainly guarantee him this longer deal that he is hoping to get from this point forward. So let me know what you guys think. Do you agree that Pete is now a clutch hitter? Do you trust him in those spots, or does he need to show you a little bit more? What parts of Pete becoming a clutch hitter excites you the most? How do you think it will help this team the most beyond just in the game, but how do you think it will help everything else? So with all that in mind, let's go Mets, baby, and let's go Pete.